Right. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Area 1 Planning Committee. For the benefit of those watching on our YouTube channel, members of the committee are present in the chamber and those members will be voting on proposals this evening. Other members of the council may be participating via MS Teams and can take part in any discussions. They can ask questions, but they cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted. But before we start with the formal business of the committee, we will confirm attendance of voting members by conducting a roll call, and that will be undertaken by Sally.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please, can you confirm that you are present? Councillor Hood?
Present.
Councillor Afwell? Present. Councillor Barton?
Present.
Councillor Bridge?
Present.
Councillor Clokey?
Present.
Councillor Cope?
Present.
Councillor Hoskins?
Present.
Councillor King?
Present.
We have received apologies from Councillor Mehmet, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Perry,
Present.
Councillor Pilgrim,
Present.
Councillor Rose,
Present.
Councillor Tunstall.
Present.
I can confirm we have 13 voting members present.
Thank you very much. Can I ask officers in the chamber to introduce themselves?
I'm Sally Wang, Democratic Services Officer.
I'm Ian Williams, Development Manager.
I'm Susan Field, Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you. And I can see Joy is online. Can you introduce yourself as well, please? Thank you.
Good evening, Joy Ukadike, Head of Legal and Democratic Services and Legal Officer for tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members of the public, the applicant and agent wishing to address the planning committee are also present in the chamber and they will be invited to speak at the appropriate time. Speaking limit is 3 minutes for each application and public speakers are unable to participate in any further discussion of the application, I'm afraid. May I remind speakers that your face and voice may appear on the live stream and the archived recording of the meeting, and your names will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Item number 2, apologies. We've received apologies in advance of the meeting from Councillor Adam Mehmet. As far as I can see, everybody else is present. We've got a full house other than Councillor Mehmet, which is great. Declarations of interest at item 3. Has any member got a declaration of interest? Great. Everybody will have seen the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have your permission to sign the minutes of that meeting? Much. Item 5 refers to the glossary and the supplementary matters, which brings us on to matters for decision tonight relating to Riding Farm, Riding Lane, Gordon Tunbridge. So I would, first of all, I'll ask Susan to introduce this item for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for the redevelopment of the site to provide 8 dwellings, and this is the Red Edge site plan showing the existing buildings. This is the proposed site plan, and the top right-hand corner plan shows the proposal in relation to the existing buildings. I think that one is quite. So this is a CGI image of the units 1 to 4, which are the ones to the front of the site. And then another CGI image of plots 5 to 8 located to the back of the site. I'm not going to go through every dwelling on the site, but I thought it would be useful just to show those that are nearest to the existing dwellings. This is plot 1 shown there in yellow. There are no first floor windows in the flank elevation facing Riding Cottage. These 2 windows you can see here are windows within the roof slope. This is a stairwell and this one serves a WC. This is plots 2 and 3, again shown in yellow. These have 2 sets of windows at first floor level, which front towards Riding Farm. This is the dwelling that's located here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Sorry. This is plot 8. Plot 8 has 1 window at first floor level serving a bedroom. So this is the one serving the bedroom. Again, this one's in the roof slope, and these 2 serve, one's a kitchen and one's a utility room. I put this slide together, so forgive me, it is not perfect, but hopefully it will just demonstrate the position of those dwellings just referred to in relation to neighbouring properties. So you've got plot 1 here with Riding Cottage here, and there's no windows in this flank elevation. These are the 2 on the first floor. They look towards Riding Farm, as I said, but there's 35 metres between them. Plot 8 that's got 1 at first floor level, not in direct alignment, and is 50 metres from window to window from a Lendon view. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. And just to put that all in context, I've got some site photos. So this is the front elevation, quite an old building, so it's not quite in as good condition as this one. This is side elevation. You can see this is the indoor arena that is absolutely falling apart now. The rear elevation of the riding arena, and this is another storage building. That's the one that's located there. That building's to be demolished as well. This is taken from roughly where the entrance would be into the actual dwellings, the site of the dwellings. This shows the existing stable buildings which form part of Riding Farm. These will remain, and this is Riding Farm and the annex. And then the sand school and everything else to do with Riding Farm is located down there. These 2 show the access. One is standing at the access at Riding Lane looking down into the site, and the one on the right is from Riding inside the site looking down to the access at Riding Lane. Next 2 are standing at the junction looking in both directions, Riding Lane, as you would enter or exit the site. And then this is the same position but turning around, so you've got Brambles on the left, that's the access to Brambles, and then you can see down into the site. And just a few key points. The council does not have a 5-year housing land supply. The site is previously developed land, so it's a brownfield site where development is acceptable in principle and encouraged. The proposal results in a reduction in floor area of 57% and a reduction in volume of 59%, and these reductions are obviously significant. The existing indoor arena is 7.8 metres at its highest point. The proposed dwellings are approximately 7.4 metres to the pitch. Given the significant reduction in volume and footprint and the overall reduction in height, the proposed development would not cause substantial harm to the openness of the greenbelt, and as such would be appropriate development. The proposal would comply with paragraph 154G, this being limited infilling or the partial or complete redevelopment of previously developed land. Won't read all of that. That would not cause substantial harm to the openness of the greenbelt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sally. Which brings us on to our speakers. So as we've pointed out, you get 3 minutes, and we've got a timer. Can I invite Mr. David Malkinson to join us, please? Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm neighbouring resident of Riding Cottage, you've just seen, with the main adjoining neighbour to the actual site and the access to the site as well. Overall, I'm comfortable with the development, but I think there's some real issues that need to be considered tonight, and 5 of those which I feel are unresolved planning issues to be discussed. The first one is access and safety. We're going to talk more, somebody else will talk more about access to the actual site in detail later, but I'm fully in support of the thinking there, and basically the access sits between my property and Mr. McIntyre's property, who will be represented later as well. Recently, I've had to stop cars in Riding Lane driving past this exact site, driving way beyond the speed limit. It's a really unsafe road, and I think the average speed limit, the speed of from the survey was about 40 miles an hour. Actually, there's a lot of people driving down Riding Lane much faster than that, and it's really dangerous, to be perfectly honest, as a resident. Second, neighbouring land, the transport statement refers to widening the access to allow two-way vehicle flow. That won't be possible with the space that's there at the moment because it's adjoining my property and Ian's property. And I can confirm at this side that we've given no consent around our land or had any conversations around our land within that as well. Thirdly, proximity and height. While it is of similar height, 7.4 metres versus the current 7.8 metres, actually the properties are going to be much closer to our boundary, and our neighbour at Holland and View much closer, a matter of a few metres away from their boundary. With that height and the distance, it will look effectively 50% taller from our garden than the current building does as well, because of that proximity. And there's been no daylight or sunlight assessment or anything like that I'm aware of, and none of the winter sun angles have been looked at either as well. This raises a real concern for us in Riding Cottage, and for me, units 1 and 8, which are those two closest to these neighbouring properties, are far too close and far too big for our view, and we feel they should be removed from the planning permission. Fourth, window positioning and privacy. Bedroom 2 actually in unit 1 looks directly towards our property, towards our bedroom and bathroom window in habitable rooms. The assessment relies on the separation distance that you've heard, but it also talks about seasonal tree cover. There's no trees in the space where that house sits, so it would literally look straight towards our upstairs bedroom and bathroom window. There are no conditions within the planning for obscure glazing, window changes or permanent screening. And once built, this lack of privacy will be irreversible from our perspective. I request again that planning consider this and also consider removing units 1 and 8 from the plan to rectify this issue. Finally, drainage and flooding. We have a lot of flooding in the area at the bottom of our garden, directly adjacent to the property. The property next door, Holland and View, has a stream running underneath their property, which floods regularly.
Mr. Malcolm, your time is up.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Can I invite Jessica Hampson, please?
Good evening, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm doing so on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. McIntyre, owners and residents of Brambles, who share the access drive to the application site. My clients do not object to the principle of the application, but consider that 8 new homes constitutes overdevelopment of this small site and its highly constrained 40-metre single-lane access onto Riding Lane. We submitted a detailed objection at planning stage, highlighting several serious flaws with the proposal, including the loss of the riding arena, a community and leisure facility. Whilst the failure to serve a notice on my clients, as owners of the first part of the access, was eventually resolved, a number of issues still stand. Firstly, the access from Riding Lane is also a public right-of-way route. The British Horse Society, along with KCC Public Rights of Way team, objected to the scheme on the basis that the shared nature of the access would cause conflict between an increase in traffic and horse riders using the route. Officers suggested that a surface treatment, visibility and vehicle speed can be left to condition, but it's difficult to envisage how this can be possible given its limited width and since part of the access is owned by other parties. Proposed conditions 8 and 9 require visibility displays to remain unobscured, and the first 5 metres of the access comprise a bound surface. These are both areas that sit outside of the applicant's control within either my client's or other parties' ownership, and therefore it's not clear how the applicant envisages that this can be achieved. There are also concerns regarding on-site parking provision. On busy days, the designated parking area for the riding stables fills up and cars spill out onto Riding Lane. Parking along Riding Lane is unsafe, given the bends in the road and the fast speeds of passing traffic. Riding stables appear to have been created an unauthorised parking area within Riding Farm, which we have deemed no planning permission obtained, causing further encroachment into the greenbelt. Without this area, and combined with the addition of 8 new homes, parking on site will be even more constrained. The increase in traffic, including delivery vans and large horse boxes, will inevitably lead to additional vehicles reversing from the narrow access and out onto Riding Lane, causing further safety issues, particularly when combined with the bridleway and horses using the route. A nearby scheme at 13 Garlands was recently refused for an inability to demonstrate safe access and the required visibility displays within land under the applicant's ownership, combined with vehicles reversing out onto Riding Lane. This shows a lack of consistency on sites which are only 100 metres from each other. The access arrangements remain unsafe with no guarantee a resolution is even possible. Planning permission should be refused where it would cause an unacceptable impact on highway safety. We believe the issues discussed show that there is a clear highways safety issue as a result of the shared long and narrow access and vehicles reversing out onto Riding Lane. It is not appropriate to condition these details, and my client will refuse permission to carry out any works on land that they own. In summary, my client remains particularly concerned about the access arrangements which propose using land they own without their permission. Required visibility displays cannot be delivered because of
I'm
this.
afraid your time is up as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll invite Elizabeth Smith to join us now. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Smith and I live at Alexander House, some 90 metres away from the proposed luxury style housing development, where I have a clear view from the front of my property. I wish to object primarily on the grounds of overdevelopment and excessive density on metropolitan green belt, which the policy is intended to protect. 8 dwellings, approximately 40 residents and 19 cars on a constrained rural site is excessive. The level of density is out of character with the surrounding open countryside in rural Hildenborough. It represents suburban intensification in a rural location. The benefits of this urban development do not outweigh the damages it will cause. The plot sits on clay with a known high water table and a long history of local flooding in surrounding gardens and along the adjacent and valued bridleway, which frequently becomes inaccessible. Several properties have pumps running 24/7, as I do, to control the water table. Hard standing for 19 vehicles and multiple dwellings, etc., will significantly increase the surface water runoff and raise flood risk both on and off site, contrary to sustainable drainage principles. You cannot change the subsoil of heavy clay. The riding centre will have to move its large horse lorries and other vehicles from the proposed site onto its flourishing riding school site, which will encroach more hard standing close by, and already I see this action happening. 2 detached 4-bedroomed homes were approved on Greenbelt land, built further along the bridleway next to this proposed development, built only under special circumstances as the land was owned by the NHS. That development was reduced by 1/3 at an Area 1 Planning Committee meeting, and the land they're now built on floods, as does neighbouring gardens and the field next door. The proposed roof layout is a major concern, showing approximately 27 roof windows alone. This will introduce cumulative light spill. Currently, the area is pitch black at night, and we, 90 metres away, have a bat loft and bats. There is a bat and a greater crested newt population in the area. This restricts movement corridors and isolates populations, over time reducing biodiversity, so irreversible environmental change, and dark skies are a defining characteristic of rural Hildenborough. So to conclude, the proposal represents inappropriate cranked overdevelopment, and I respectfully ask that the application is significantly reduced in the number of dwellings to reflect the rural character of this environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I invite Sheila Kennedy, please, to join us? Thank you.
My name is Sheila Kennedy. I've lived on Riding Lane continuously for over 40 years. My property lies to the south of the proposed development, sharing a boundary with the property Brambles, which abuts the south side of the access tract to the site. Having read the relevant documentation, my conclusion is that there are vital issues which have not been given either proper consideration, inquiry, or clarification. Indeed, some wording in respect of access to the site is disingenuous. Firstly, there are major problems in respect of access and egress of vehicles, including emergency vehicles. For a length of some 40 metres, the access track varies in width from 3.2 metres to 3.6 metres. It is only sufficiently wide for one vehicle width, and should vehicles meet, one will have to reverse either into riding lane or onto the small car park used by the riding school. It is certainly not wide enough for a vehicle and a horse to pass safely. Reversing into riding lane, which is only 5 metres in width, is already taking place and creates a significant risk to highway users who frequently approach this section of riding lane at high speed, despite the nearby blind bend. Proposed conditions include, in an approval, assume that the stated improvements can be achieved to the access track by the provision of visibility splays and partial resurfacing. Surely the appropriate proposal would also need to widen the track. There is no agreement from the two adjoining owners to carry out the improvements proposed. So what if no agreement can be reached and planning approval has been granted? I am surprised that there is no mention of an emergency access on the plan, surely a high priority given the width of the only existing access, and no invitation to Kent Fire Brigade to comment on this. Secondly, I have a deep concern regarding traffic and parking problems, which I fear will increase in riding lane and result in health and safety issues to pedestrians, horses, highway users, and damage to existing grass verges. The absence of pavements and street lighting, the speed of traffic and number of cyclists and horse riders which use the road already pose daily health and safety issues. A bus service of only 2 buses per day, 4 days a week, means that this is a car-reliant area. Due to the minimal provision of visitor spaces on the site, visiting cars, utilities and contractors' vehicles will have no alternative than to park on riding lane. Recent parking of contractors' vehicles on riding lane working at a property close to the riding farm entrance often reduced traffic flow to single file and reduced the usable width of road to an extent that heavy vehicles mounted the grass verge, including my own, and to brambles, and caused not only severe damage but also cut away 350 millimetres from its exposed ridge. My access was also blocked on occasion. Clause 6.78 of the officer's report states that an application should be refused if there is an impact on highway safety, and the NPPF confirms this. I therefore urge you, our councillors, to apply common sense and health and safety considerations to this ill-considered application and refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Jill Shukla, please? Thank you very much.
My name is Jill Shukla and I live at the other end of the bridle path in Vines Lane. I should like to speak mainly about the high water table and drainage situation in the area. The application and subsequent documentation show a lack of awareness of the existence and, more importantly, impact of watercourses running above and below ground through the area of proposed development and the nearby land. Much of this water comes from higher ground into Vines Lane towards this area, and in addition, the very heavy clay also contributes to the high water table. Riding Lane frequently floods from the drains there, and infrequent clearance results in only temporary relief. Contractors, for example Openreach last week, have to pump out much water and sludge from access holes before any work can commence. The bridle path is a good safe route for walkers and riders, but it is frequently flooded. An underground watercourse runs from a property adjoining this into the pond on the site, which must surely be given some consideration. Heavy rainfall results in flooding across the field between our house and the site, and it runs along the bridle path and into the gardens of those of us in close proximity to it. Unfortunately, this has been exacerbated by the building of 2 houses at the end of the bridle path, allowed under special consideration. We have subsequently had to change the layout of our garden to now accommodate this flooding, as our hens were suffering as a result of it. Experience has shown that once constructed, there is no further monitoring, and the residents may well extend patios, install sheds and working from home buildings in their gardens, and this all affects the soakaway. Water is indeed a major concern. In addition, it's stated in the planning department report that the refuse for future occupants will be taken away by the present efficient private contractor. However, this contractor doesn't handle recycling, as the present occupants always place their green bins and paper on other people's private property on Riding Lane. As walkers and cyclists who frequently use Riding Lane, we are very concerned about the traffic around the entrance, the parking, the restricted visibility, the national speed limit, lack of footpaths, reduced verges, safety of those crossing to join footpath MT20 on the other side of the road. The local plan suggests the possibility of the development of 67 houses within 300 metres of this site, a potential significant increase in traffic and risk to riders, walkers and cyclists. I therefore respectfully request that the committee do not approve this application for such a dense development in an area that will be detrimentally affected on so very many levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Mr. David Bedford, please.
Good evening, members. You have a detailed report in front of you, and so I won't regurgitate policy or housing need. The application was also called to committee owing to a desire to see the Greenbelt protected, and so that's naturally the area that I have focused on in my presentation for those reasons. As you may be aware, we pursued pre-application advice and submitted the application in 2024. At that time, national policy said that we could redevelop part of the site as long as there was no greater impact on openness. So the applicant worked hard to design a scheme that protects the riding school and delivers a 59% less volume. With such a reduction, there was clear policy compliance. But even if there was room for debate then, updated national policy has eradicated it, increasing the threshold of what is permissible on a brownfield site. Proposing less than half the existing volume cannot cause substantial harm to openness, and to suggest something other would be so extreme that it would be unreasonable. In any event, the case officer has also explained why the development is appropriate under the new grey belt provisions. Turning to wider material considerations and matters, the design, as I said, was informed by pre-application advice, and we have submitted detailed evidence on road safety audits, showing that the access is safe and deliverable, and that has led to no objection from Kent Highways. Matters of land ownership we dispute. Obviously, I don't have the time to rebut those in detail, but fortunately for you, they're outside of the scope of the planning system anyway, and not something that you can take into account. Quite simply, if the land isn't available and it isn't delivered, then there is the control of those neighbours to stop development from coming forward. Private refuse collection arrangements and the proposed landscape buffers have been carefully designed, and that's around animal welfare and the existing uses that are going to be retained on site. Ecological enhancements and high quality materials have been selected, and they will be secured via conditions and the legal agreement. Given the popularity of the riding school and the scale of greenfield land release that's been proposed locally, we are slightly surprised by the level of neighbour objections. The buildings to be replaced are unsafe and they're not capable of use or capable of repair, and the cost of doing so is just simply not something that the riding school can fund. By working with a local developer, this proposal will not only make the site safe, but it will provide the investment for the riding school to continue. In contrast, without that investment, the future of the riding school is significantly in doubt, and there is a much higher probability of the whole site becoming vacant and a much wider redevelopment being proposed. In that instance, without any changes to the access at all, the existing trips would be less, so there wouldn't be requirement to change any access arrangements. Drainage, again, is suitable, but as part of any redevelopment of a brownfield site, it's a requirement to return the land to equivalent of greenfield conditions. So again, that's not a reasonable matter for refusal.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As is customary, I will come to the local members first. Come to you first.
Chairman, thank you. Okay, so from the outset, I will vote against this. And my reason for voting against this, Chairman, is because I did call for it to come to committee and it is in the MGB. The other reason is that on every manifesto that I have stood for council, we have written, former colleagues, myself as well, we have written that we will do our best to protect the MGB. So if I was to vote for it, I would be going against my own manifesto. However, no doubt the next local plan, I'm going to have to change my mind possibly down the line there. The key points put up on the screen earlier on, I have to say, are absolutely overwhelming in support for this this application. The reduction in square footage is immense, really outstanding. There are 8 properties proposed. A couple of the speakers did mention that that was over-intensive, and to be honest about it, I'm surprised we're not looking at more houses on this site than 8. The access from Riding Lane. Riding Lane is 60 miles an hour, and of course, lots of people could turn up at one time to ride horses and do their work at the riding stable. So cars going in and out, whether it's houses or the riding school, I think is little different really. The extra buildings suggested by someone earlier on a moment ago, is there a reason, a recommendation that can be added, should this go forward for approval, that any extra buildings external from that need a permission first? That's about all I need to say. Oh, there was one resident did say the view to the window and obscure glass. So can we make sure that there is obscure glass where there needs to be obscure glass, please? Other than that, Chairman, as I say, I will be voting against this. Thank you very much on MGB grounds.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barton, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Yes, I would. I love living in Hildenborough. I am a regular runner, cyclist and walker on Riding Lane. And one of the reasons that I love the area so much is because of its open space, because of its nature, because of the, when there's not cars racing along that road at 60 miles an hour, there is a genuine sense of peace down there. There's Hildenborough road races down there. It's a fantastic area to take advantage of the local green space. However, the fact I live somewhere doesn't mean that we don't look to the law in planning meetings, and unfortunately our hands are tied, and we do need to act within the guidance of the planning framework and within the guidance of the law as it stands. And unfortunately, I really can't see any grounds to object to this. I understand your residents' concern, I really do. However, the fact that we've got a road that's 3.5 metres wide still allows a fire engine that's 2.5 metres wide to go along it. Yes, Riding Lane can be perilous to walk down when there's no pavement there. And yes, there isn't a massive bus service down there at all. And I wish those things were different. Unfortunately, these aren't grounds on which we can object to this planning proposal. As Councillor Rose said, I'm quite surprised that there aren't more houses proposed for this site. It's a brownfield site. Brownfield sites are incredibly limited around Tonbridge and Malling. And I'm very surprised that developers aren't trying to make more use of this space. I did have concerns about the impact on the local nature in terms of bats, in terms of swifts. However, looking at the plans, I can see the developers are making moves to mitigate this. There are the swift boxes. There is concern to the drainage. I would like some clarification from the officers, please, about the waste. I was a little confused by the details in the document about the waste arrangement. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like a little clarification on that, please. But otherwise, I'm sorry, residents, I can understand your concerns, and I can understand that nobody wants more houses in a rural village, but I really don't think we have legal grounds to object. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a response to those comments about the comment relating to a possible condition about additional buildings within the footprint of the gardens? If you can deal with that one first, please.
In respect to sort of removing PD rights in Greenbelt, the NPPF is clear that we shouldn't be removing PD rights within the Greenbelt unless there's a justification and it's reasonably necessary. From my experience of dealing with Greenbelt applications, generally inspectors will consider it necessary and justifiable when you are sort of offsetting. They're very special circumstances, should I say, for that development. In this case, development's appropriate and it meets policy. So therefore, it would be difficult to justify and give reasonable justification for the removal of PD rights in respect to any development on that site. So I'm afraid I think that condition in particular would be difficult for us to defend at appeal through Section 73. You know, if we were arguing a very special circumstances case, then we could possibly use that as part of the BSCs to say, well, actually, on balance, it's acceptable, but that's only when with the removal of the PD rights. In terms of the obscure glazing condition, I think that would be really acceptable.
I'll come back to you on the waste. We did ask the agent about this one, and they've come back saying the use of the private collection service is preferred owing to the sensitivity of keeping horses. Private collection means that the owners can coordinate and control the days, times and types of vehicles to ensure that the impacts on horses are appropriately managed. The private contractor will offer the equivalent or an enhanced opportunity to recycle food and garden waste. And we have added an informative just to bring to their attention the comments from our waste on not supplying bins, etc.
Thank you. Am I able to ask if the access is sufficiently wide for these proposed waste collections? Presume it's smaller than a fire engine.
I would imagine that if they're currently removing waste, there are private collections from the site that they would use similar, collection vehicles. And obviously, if the vehicle's far too large for that, they're probably a smaller one. See what I mean? So I would imagine how it would work.
Yeah, I just want some clarification about this condition regarding obscure glazing, because I'm guessing, I'm not guessing, I would want clarification of what buildings, what windows we would be talking about, because not all of those units are going to require obscure glass. So I think we need to specify which unit, which of those units, if that was to be a condition, going to require obscure glass.
From my experience, again, from dealing with these, the separation distances are generally sufficient for there not to be a need of obscure glazing. Again, you would not typically obscure glaze habitable accommodation either. It'd only be sort of, as it were, bathrooms typically that you would obscure glaze, or any windows that are serving communal areas, or I say hallways or non-habitable areas. So in this case, given the separation distance of over 35 metres, I don't think, again, it would be reasonable in this case for those units to be obscure glazed if they're serving habitable rooms. However, if it's a bathroom, you want that mutual privacy between the two.
Thank you very much. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're all going to struggle with the dilemma that Councillor Rhodes referred to. But obviously, living in the world of the NPPF 2024 NPPF, some of the constraints have been tightened. And so I looked at this and I looked to what extent would I try to object to it. And one of the things which this isn't, it isn't next to a settlement, it's remote from the edge of settlement. So basically, I don't have an overwhelming objection because it is remote from the edge of settlement. It is previously developed land. I don't think anyone can argue from that. It is effectively brownfield. It's as close as you can get to being a disused petrol station, which the government seems to think is in multitude out there. So it is pretty close to something which is high on the radar as far as being development opportunity. It has operated on a commercial basis in the past, so hence it qualifies under that banner. And this is what I thought was quite a selling point, really, for the for development. The proposal would occupy a smaller footprint within the existing buildings and the existing hard standing, which I think is fairly rare. So in terms of surface water runoff, I would have thought you may actually get less rather than more. The conditions that the parish council listed, I thought were all admirable, and I checked with Susan before the meeting out of interest and asked her if they'd all been written into the scope of the application that's been proposed, and I understand that they have, so that reassures me on that front. Although there was reference to the Great Crested Newts and what have you, and I'm not really sure that that is demonstrated by any biological survey or what have you. So they may be in the area, they may not, but I'm not sure it's actually a piece of evidence that we have in front of us. But there were references to hedgerows which weren't being dramatically interfered with. There are no tree preservation orders were being influenced, as far as I understood, and there is some intention to deal with bird boxes and bat provision if that seems appropriate during the construction stage, as I understand it. So basically, most of my normal objections sort of whittled away. I'm not clear about the access. I don't think it can be dramatically increased, but it does function, as someone said, to an extent today. I don't know about the refuse vehicles. That obviously would be, they'd be as large as a horse box. I don't really know about the overdevelopment. It doesn't sound as though it is, but I'm not sure what the actual hectareage or acreage of this particular plot is, and whether or not it's considered overdeveloped or not. I suspect not. Parking provision, we normally argue in the opposite direction, that there isn't enough, and perhaps there never is enough. I recall that it was either the last area one or the one before where there was some development in New York Parade, if you remember, which was bizarre because it was a single access road to the back. And unfortunately, our consultees didn't seem to think that was okay. I didn't particularly. But obviously this has been found workable because it already functions as a riding stables. So basically, when I've looked at it, I'm sure I'm going to be taking a harder view on other things that don't meet this criteria. When I looked at it, I can't think of too many reasons why it shouldn't go ahead. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for those comments. Councillor Athwell.
Thank you. I just want to clarify a few things, having listened to what everyone's been saying. Can you just tell me for absolute definite, is this green belt, grey belt, brown belt? Because I've heard it spoken about in all three different ways. It seems that we think it's green belt, but it's previously developed, and on the slide we had up there, it's called brown belt. And then in the document, it refers to it as grey belt. So I'm terribly confused about that. And I would just like to understand exactly what this is. And if it's a question of everyone else make up their own minds, please explain that to me a bit more. Secondly, what's been hard listening to the residents tonight is that I believe I'm right, and please confirm this for me, and we can't take into account existing issues if we don't think this is going to make it worse. So the fact that Riding Lane is 60 miles an hour and is full of traffic and there's lots of water, we don't think this is going to make it worse. We can't use that as a reason to object to the planning application. My understanding of the law, the rules. So please just confirm that to me. Bits that seem to be a sticking point for me is one, we're talking about converting a bridle path into something else. Can we do that? Is that allowed? Can you help me with the rules around that? Because, you know, if somebody told me a footpath was suddenly going to be taken away and turned into a road, I'm sure that would be a reason to, you'd have a reason to object to that. So I'd really like to understand the detail about the bridle path and what we're proposing. The other bit that was worrying for me was talking about widening access, and if that land is owned by people who will not be comfortable in letting the developer do that, does that stop the application, or do they carry on and build the houses and then go, oops, we couldn't widen the access or widen the mouth of the road, if you like? So I'd just like to understand a bit more about that. And the other thing I did hear was concerns about overlooking and that sort of thing. And apparently in the plan, there's some words about there being tree screening, but there aren't any trees. Could we put conditions in to explain that there needs to be hedges or trees to help with some of that? Those are the 5 things that were on my mind. And I'd just like a bit of clarity over those before I make up my mind. Yeah.
So if I was to first of all clarify the business between Greybelt, Greenbelt
Yep.
and Brownfield sites.
Okay, I'll do a couple of points and I expect Ian will do some. So the site is Greenbelt. It'll always be Greenbelt unless it's removed via the local plan process. But there is also a couple of layers now, which is a brownfield layer, and obviously now the new Greybelt. I don't consider we need to look at Greybelt on this application because it is a brownfield site. It's got previously developed buildings on it, so it's previously developed land. So it's still Greenbelt, but it's got that extra, it's previously developed land. Just on your highways matters, I mean, just please bear in mind that Kent County Council haven't objected. So they consider the access and obviously the surrounding traffic or the traffic coming from the development to be acceptable. And the bridle path, if I can just explain. So the site plan I put up, the bridle path is here, just outside the red edging, running along the development. And I have got some photographs. So it's a bit unusual in that the bridle path is actually from these yellow, see these white, whatever bollards, whatever they are, yeah. So the bridle path runs along here, actually. It stops here, mainly because there are now mature trees that have grown in this area. So this actually is the bridle path, but now it's not used. And it seems to be unofficially that it now comes into the highways here. And then it goes back through this gate, and then you can see it on the right going up through there. So just to confirm also, this is the bridleway map. The blue is a bridleway, and you can see it just runs along the outside. This is the official route, but obviously, as I say, it's now slightly into the site. So that's why the rights of way officer has suggested, it wasn't us as officers, the rights of way officer has suggested a condition where the surface details are submitted so that there can be some recognition that the bridleway is now slightly on the road. That makes sense?
Athwell, what were the other items?
To confirm that any existing issues can't be taken into account unless we're making them worse. And then just some thoughts about tree screening.
So yes, so if you were to refuse an application as a local planning authority, you need to demonstrate, well, harm in some way. So either harm in the material consideration or policy harm. So if you're not making an existing situation worse, I'm afraid that you can't demonstrate that harm unless it's contrary to a particular policy, essentially. And even then, the interpretation of policies can be somewhat flexible as well. In terms of the land ownership, as a local planning authority, you can condition things within the red line of the site. However, that red line can include other people's land. So you need to separate any civil issues that the developer might have with any planning issues, as it were. So theoretically, you could you can grant planning permission for something on someone else's land, but the developer has to go through the civil issues such as getting the rights of way or buying the land or what have you from the landowner. So they're two separate hurdles, shall we say, that a developer would have to deal with. And then the final thing is that there is a landscaping condition on the application as well. So any sort of hedging and planting can be considered.
I'm absolutely sure we could grant planning permission, then the developer could try to go through the civil routes to get access to the land to do whatever we've conditioned. If they're unable to do that and they're unable to meet that condition of the planning, does that invalidate the planning permission?
So any condition where you would put it on which they would need to do prior to commencement to make sure the development's acceptable. So you would make sure that those conditions are pre-commencement. Obviously, if they start works before that, we can take enforcement action for breach of condition. So things essentially like widening access, which is not within your control, that should be a pre-commencement condition. And if they can't provide us with the details prior to commencement, essentially.
On the matter of this landscaping condition, are we able to insist on the screening by those trees that was mentioned a minute ago? Is that something that we can add to that condition at this point to stipulate that we want to see that screening?
It's something that we could put in there. I think if committee are minded to approve the application, I think we would discuss with the applicant whether or not we can be more specific with the landscaping, and then agree that final condition, which would be more specific with the chair and vice chair if that work for the committee.
Thank you. Next up, I've got Councillor Hoskins.
I was going to ask about the land ownership and the drive and the non-existent trees, and Councillor Rathwell's already done it, so I don't need to.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say to the speakers who've come this evening that one of you appealed to our common sense, but we don't get to decide on those grounds. We have to decide with the framework that we're given. So it's not that we're unsympathetic and we don't understand why things might cause residents distress, but we cannot have our common sense appealed to. We can only make decisions within the bounds of the rules. So thank you. Unfortunately, so I think it's a misconception that we have more power than we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cope. There's a few issues I just want to get clarification on, or just to cover at this point. The additional garden buildings, if they're not temporary structures, if they're permanent structures, they would have to go through a planning process as well. Obviously there's another riding arena nearby here, so and we've got when we consider the access, there's a waste vehicle, there's a refuse vehicle that uses that access lane already, so that's already been covered. We've covered because the closest dwellings are so far away from the nearest existing dwelling that obscure glass is not going to be appropriate. It won't be, and this comes down to the wider application. It's about the committee making a decision here, which is going to be substantial, and it is not going to be overturned easily should it come to appeal, should it come in front of a planning inspector. We are governed by the National Planning Policy Framework, and that the relevant sections have been outlined in the report. And there are I think I can't see any grounds. So I understand that we've got members who will vote against this, and that is absolutely their right. However, I haven't heard single grounds for refusal yet. If anyone's got a legitimate or substantial grounds for refusal? I'd like to hear it now. Councillor King.
I'm not giving you that exact response, but I haven't had the resolution to the question earlier, that I've heard, which is the overbearing aspect of it. And that's regard to the acceptable distance and the acceptable height with regard to the nearest properties. And I know there are rules that are associated with that. I want you to remind us, please. Thank you.
So in terms of planning law, a view is not protected unless there's a specific policy or protection of a particular view. So I'm just trying to think, for example, in London, there's a specific view from Regent's Park across the thing, which is particularly protected. But there is planning law and case law, which says that, and I think even made the national press where someone had done something and you just basically not protected. However, Outlook is, and Outlook's more your immediate impact. So therefore, you're really actually looking at the view from Riding Farm would change. I'm not saying it won't, but their outlook would still not be significantly harmed, and it wouldn't be an overbearing development due to those separation distances. You're talking more of the immediate impact on the neighbours. So 2-storey rear extensions close up to habitable windows, that's when you would then make the argument for overbearing, because you can see it immediately. So as it were, rather than being a longer range view. So in this particular case, if you were minded to try and refuse it on overbearing, I would say that that's not a sustainable reason for refusal, simply because of the separation distances. And I'd be 99% sure that the inspector would consider upholding, because it's more of a view that distance rather than being an outlook of development.
Can I just clarify, please? That 35 metres, that's really from window surface to window surface. Let's call it patio door to patio door, shall we? But if it's a 2-storey building, presumably there's still an outlook from the 2nd storey. Now, if it was a bathroom or a shower room, whatever, that would normally be obscured glass. Anyway, if it was a bedroom looking into another bedroom on the other property, you're saying that there are no ground rules for whether or not that should be part obscured or not. Thank you.
I'll just come back to you on that. The 35 metres I've shown there is rear flank elevation just to the garden or to the edge of Riding Farm. So it's not window to window. There is a rough guide of window to window of 22 metres. And then window to flank would be 14 metres. So obviously the distances involved in this case they far exceed that. And also the 50-metre one, just point out, is not in direct alignment as well. It's it's not in direct alignment.
Oh, Councillor Cokie.
Thank you. Just to go back to the question of a pre-commencement condition on the access, do we have that currently in place in the proposal? Because I was skimming through and couldn't spot it. I can see condition 8, which is prior to first occupation.
Yeah, it's not prior to commencement, it's prior to the first occupation.
Would it be reasonable to change 8 to be a pre-commencement condition?
Yes, we would have to agree that with the agent, as there is, again, it's the obligation of the council. If we are to add pre-commencement conditions, we need to agree them with applicant before we put them on. But I'm sure we can do that and then go back to the chair and vice chair. And I should imagine that they'd be happy to provide that detail if they can do it.
How reliable is that?
Well, I mean, obviously, if members would be minded to approve subject to the changes to condition, if the applicant's not prepared to change that condition, we then come back and discuss whether it's acceptable. planning committee. So that would be your recommendation if you were minded to approve.
Councillor Rhodes.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just be clear on that? The officer said that he'd have to ask the applicant to change something. I thought we were here in charge and we say what goes on the recommendation. Can you just explain why you have to go and see the applicant about this, please?
I can't remember the exact section off the top of my head, but the planning authority has to agree pre-commencement conditions with the applicant prior to putting them on any decision notice. We're required to give them. Sorry.
Can I assist with that? Is that okay?
Yes.
I've got the conditions, use of planning conditions open, and it says a pre-commencement condition must not be imposed on the grant of permission other than a grant of outline planning permission within the meaning of section 92 of the 1990 Act without a written agreement of the applicant, except in the circumstances which are set out in the Town and Country Planning Act pre-commencement condition. So usually you would need the applicant's agreement. If not, it could probably be, it's something that could be appealed. So we need to, obviously, as it is a pre-commencement condition, as Ian has said, we will need their written agreement. So that could be something that be discussed. And as he says, if it's not something that's agreed, it can always be brought back to committee.
Delegate subject to that pre.
Just to clarify where we are, we can't say you can have permission with this pre-commencement condition, but we can say, if you agree to this pre-commencement condition, we have delegated authority to grant you permission. Essentially. And if you don't agree to it, we'll all come back and have this conversation again. Okay.
The other issues that were brought up by speakers, I just wanted to, in terms of the drainage, excellent points were made relating to the drainage. There's also a condition which has to demonstrate, the applicant has to demonstrate how drainage from the area is going to be dealt with. And with regard to the Kent highways and their response, the only way that this committee could turn this application down in terms of on highways ground is if the effect of it was severe, and that is almost never the result of Kent highways consideration of a application, I'm afraid, and it certainly wouldn't be in this case. So on the basis of what we've heard, and that it's subject to the applicant agreeing to the amendment of that condition, I'm going to put this to the vote.
Sorry, Chair, just before you do that, could you just remind me what the extra condition is that we're seeking to put in, please?
So condition 8, rather than reading prior to first occupation of the dwellings, the access shall be implemented as shown on the approved. Actually, it's a compliance condition, so we don't even need the. So, sorry, I've missed. There is no pre-commencement condition for the access. The Highways Authority considers the access to be acceptable in its current guise. Sorry, that was my mistake. So therefore, the applicant would still need to get the permission of the other landowners if they made any changes to it as part of that part of that condition. However, if they didn't get those changes from the landowner, permission from the landowner to get those changes, they would be in breach of that condition and we could take enforcement action. So it's something they still need to do. But rather than being a pre-commencement condition for them to submit information, it's just a compliance condition. The Highway Authority considers the access as shown on the drawings to be acceptable in that particular instance. So that would be my advice. Sorry.
I'm still unsure of why we shouldn't be amending that to instead of first occupation to commencement, as Councillor Cloak has pointed out. Sorry.
So what it is that the details that they provided are acceptable as considered by the Highway Authority. So there's no further detail that needs to be submitted. And that's typically when you would have a trigger point. So what the condition is saying is, prior to the occupation, they need to implement the access as shown on the drawings. If they don't do it, then obviously we have the ability to enforce a breach.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the effect of condition 8 is that they can go ahead and they can build, but nobody can occupy anything that's built until the access is implemented.
That's correct.
And the concern, I think, of other members was, what if they go ahead and build it, then find that they can't implement the access and go, oh, terribly sorry, but I built all these houses now, can we change it? Which was why I think there was suggestion of, if you change it to prior to commencement, they would have to actually physically build the road before they built the houses. Is that correct?
So yes, sorry. Usually you would have pre-commencement submit additional information. Now, obviously, you can, as a local planning authority, we can change the trigger, as it were, for them to implement that access. So it could be prior to the erection of any dwellings on the site. The access shall be built out as per the approved dwellings. That would then force them to deal with the access first and then erect the dwellings. And if that's a concern of the committee that they will go ahead and do that breach of that condition, then that's within your power to do so, essentially.
So I think that's what we're trying to achieve here, is to make sure that the road is all in place, and therefore that all the legal work has been in place before someone starts building some houses. So yes,
that's correct. So I would then recommend in that instance, as prior to the erection of any dwellings, the access shall be implemented as per the approved.
That is good. That is going to be the wording that we're going to be taking a vote on. Thank you very much. And this is going to require a roll call, please, Sally. Yeah, condition 8. Wording.
Ali, would you like me to read out the? So condition 8 would read, prior to the erection of any dwellings on the site, the access shall be implemented as shown on the approved plans. No obstructions over 1.05 metres above the carriageway level within the splays, or 0.6 metres where the footway crosses the access, and thereafter shall be retained and maintained as such.
I'm proposing that wording. I'm proposing the recommendation to approve with these amendments. I need a seconder. Thank you very much, Councillor Cloakey, seconding.
And so members are now voting on this proposal to approve with the amended condition just read out by Ian Williams. And it is proposed by the chair and seconded by Councillor Cloakey. When I call your name, please can you indicate whether you are for, against, or abstaining from this vote? Councillor Hood?
For.
Councillor Afwell? Councillor Barton? For. Councillor Bridge?
For.
Councillor Cloakey?
For.
Councillor Cope?
For.
Councillor Hoskins?
For.
Councillor King?
For.
Councillor Oliver?
For.
Councillor Perry?
For.
Councillor Pilgrim?
For.
Councillor Rose?
Against.
Councillor Tunstall?
For.
We have 12 members voted in favor, 1 member voted against. The application is approved.
Thank you very much. That application has been approved. Right, so we have no matters for information because we have no appeals to report to the committee, and there being no urgent items. I would like to close this meeting at 20 to 9. Thank you very much for your attendance.